Hello and welcome to the final step of making your plushie. We are at my home today, so a little bit different background, a little bit different tabletop, a little bit different lighting, but hopefully it all goes well. I think it will. This is my finished Tundra the tiger. So she's got her whiskers, she's all sewed together. She is finished. Before I show you how to sew the front to the back, stuff, and close your plushie, I did want to go over all the little hand sewing stitches that I used to applique everything onto her front and her back. Her ears, her nose, her chin, and her tummy are all put on with the basting / running stitch. They are not stress bearing seams, so they didn't have to be super sturdy. Her little cheeks, though, her little chubby cheeks, I whip stitched on, and that's because I did stuff them. So unfortunately, with the finished product, you can't really tell that there's more batting under here than just the rest of her head, but it is stuffed, and because it was stuffed, I knew it would have a lot more stress on it than anything else I appliqued on, so I did use the whip stitch. The line going from her little nose down to her mouth is back stitched, and then her actual mouth is blanket stitched on, and I like the blanket stitch because it makes it seem furry, because of the little sort of stitch lines that go out from the mouth. I feel like it looks a little furry and fun. Her eyes are 2 hole buttons that I stitched onto the face, and then her pupils are just slit shaped pieces of black felt. All of her stripes are put on with a basting / whip stitch. It's a basting stitch in that it's definitely not stress bearing whatsoever. It's a whip stitch in that it doesn't go straight. It does this like a whip stitch does. But it's a stitch that no one will ever teach you. It's not a great stitch, but none of these stripes are stress bearing whatsoever. And it was a nice, quick, easy stitch for me to do. The tail was sewn right sides together, flipped inside out. That was fun. And then the stripes were added around it. Okay. I'm going to show you how to put your plushie together in this video. So stay tuned. All right, so I have the 2 sides of my little tiger. Okay, I have the front here and the back here. I want to show you a couple things. I already started sewing it together because I thought I was recording and then I wasn't. I just want to show you a couple of things though. You can see how I've done the stripes, that they are sort of hanging off on the sides, and that's true all the way around. Now this is because once I put the front to the back, I'm going to fold these stripes over, and then they'll show on the front. So I'll have stripes that wrap around the arms and the legs and the tummy and stuff like that. However, I don't want them to get caught in my seam that I'm doing, which is why I am folding them back and pinning them down so that they don't get caught up in my side seam. If they get caught up in my side seam, then they won't be able to fold over when I'm done. You'll notice too that I didn't sew them all the way to the end. I left that 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around, and that's because that seam allowance isn't going to be seen. It's going to be tucked away on the inside of the plushie. So if I had sewn this all the way to the edge, when I sewed the front to the back, it would have been caught on the inside of the plushie. I wouldn't have been able to wrap it around the outside. So that's why there's that seam allowance there. Something else to note is that I did make a little tail, and it's 3-dimensional. And the side seam of this little tail here is going to look exactly like the side seam of your plushie. See how everything's hidden and it's nice and flat, looks polished and professional? That's what sewing the front to the back right sides together and then flipping it right side out will do. So I'm going to go ahead and get my stripes pinned down again. And I'm going to finish sewing the front to back. Before I do that though, and I did have this done before when I thought I was recording, but before I start sewing, I need to pin all the way around. And I started off not using a lot of pins because it's felt and felt doesn't really slip or slide. It's not what we call woodgy fabric, meaning that it slips and slides all over itself and doesn't stay where you want it to be. It's not woodgy fabric, so I at first didn't use very many pins. However, I have since seen the error of my ways, because even though it wasn't woodgy, because we've, I filmed these videos over a few days. I'm at my house today, actually. And being carded all over the place and being sewed on and stretched. Remember, felt is not woven, it is felted. And so there's nothing to keep these little fibers from pulling apart and sort of changing shape. So that has happened a little bit over the last couple of days. And so I'm really trying to make sure that I line up my front to my back with these pins so that I don't end up getting a really wonky looking project. You'll notice most of my pins I'm actually going with the fabric, not into the fabric like these. The only reason these are going into the fabric is because I don't have very much room here. And if I did them like these, I would only get one here and one there, and I wanted a little bit more stability than that. But generally speaking, when hand sewing, this is how we pin. When we're machine sewing, we pin like this, but we're not machine sewing these, so. All right. So I've got this all pinned, and I don't have from here to here pinned. And that's because I'm going to need a hole through which to turn my plushie right side out and also to stuff it. And I have, through making a bunch of these, I have found that the best place to leave that hole is right here. So sort of under his armpit down to like where his little ankle would be. This nice little hole right there. So now that I am pinned all the way around, I'm going to continue sewing. I'm using the back stitch, okay, and you can see my stitches. I'm keeping that 1/4 of an inch seam allowance all the way around, right? I'll show you what we do when we get to corners. You have to take corners kind of carefully, but this is what the right side of my stitch line looks like. And here's what the back side of my stitch line looks like. And you can tell that the back side's a little not as clean, not as nice looking as the front side, and that's completely okay. As long as it doesn't look super crazy, and as long as the front side looks really nice, that's the way to do it. I'm also taking fairly small stitches. This is going to be a stress-bearing seam, so we want these stitches to be nice and tight. So I'm doing on the straightish parts, I'm doing about 1/4 of an inch. On the corners and on the curves, I'm doing much smaller. And I'll show you why when we get to the first. All right, as I'm getting up this corner, which is going to happen right here, I'm going to start taking much smaller stitches. This is because we're eventually going to cut this corner. We're going to clip it. And you run the risk, if your stitches are too big, of actually cutting your thread when you go to clip your corners. So right up next to these corners, I'm taking really small stitches. All right. So I've stitched all the way up the point right here. Okay. And I need to start going this way. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to take from the back. I'm going to start going the way I need to go. And we're still going to, just like with all of our back stitches, come up and kiss the stitch we made before. And then continue on this way. These first couple of stitches are going to be really, really small. Okay. So there's another small stitch. And here's another small stitch. And now I can start making my stitches a little longer. All right, so this fabric here, I was going through a lot of layers. I was going through this layer, this orange layer, this black layer, a pink layer that's underneath the black layer, and this orange layer. That was a lot of layers. So I was having to do all the steps, individual steps of the back stitch. I go all the way through and pull, and then all the way through and pull, and all the way through. Now I'm only going to be going through 2 layers of fabric, 2 orange layers of fabric, and so I can cut my steps in half by keeping my needle and thread on one side. I'm going to go in where my last stitch ended, right here, and then I'm going to pop up where I want my next stitch to begin. Pull. Now I'm going to go in where this stitch ended, pass by where my thread is coming out, go where I want my next stitch to begin, and pull. It's the exact same stitch, we're just staying on one side of the fabric instead of having to pull all the way through and pull all the way through and pull all the way through. Just is a little bit faster and a little bit easier. If you find that this is not faster or easier for you, or if you're confused, then by all means, don't do it. Do it the good old-fashioned way. So again, we're coming up to a corner, so I'm going to make my next couple of stitches really small. Okay, and now I'm going to make my stitch where I start going this way, nice and small. Return that corner. another nice small stitch. Coming through right here. All right, and now that this corner has been turned, I can start doing slightly larger stitches again. All right, we are coming up on a curve. So I'm going to want to do not as tiny as stitches as I've been doing on the corners, but fairly small. All right, so I have sewn all the way around, keeping my quarter of an inch seam allowance. I made sure that on each of the corners that I have made my stitches very tight. And now what we're going to do is called clipping your seams, clipping your corners, clipping your curves. And I've already started on this side. And you can see what I've done is around the curve, I've taken out little triangle pieces. Okay. Now the thing I want to impress upon you most, the saying I want to impress upon you most is to, not through. You want to cut to your stitch line, not through your stitch line. If you cut through your stitch line, you are going to be very sad because you'll have to re-sew it because you'll have cut your thread. Now, it's important too, on the front side of where we did our back stitch, it's going to look nice and neat and put together. Each stitch is going to touch the stitch before it, right? It's going to kiss it like we talked about. And it's going to seem like, oh, I can cut all the way up right into that seam. This is not the case because on the back side, your stitches are a lot more cattywampus. They aren't necessarily as straight as the stitches on the front. This is just the nature of the back stitch. So you really want to cut your corners and your curves while looking at the back side of your stitching, because that's where you're going to mess up and cut your thread. So you can see for these little inward facing corners, I cut all the way up right to the stitch line on those. On the outward facing corners, like this little ear, I just cut off the corner. And then on every curve, we're going to take out these little shark teeth and cut to but not through. If it's not a curve, like this is a slight curve, not a major curve, but basically all the seams are going to be curved on this little tiger. On those ones, I don't cut out the shark teeth, but I do cut little, just little cuts right to the stitch line. This is because all of this area is on the outside, right? All the seam allowance is on the outside of your stitch line. It's got the whole world to spread out in. Now, as soon as we actually go through and flip our little plushie right side out, all of a sudden all the seam allowance that had the whole world to spread out in now is going to be squished and confined within this section here. And if we don't make allowances for that, if we don't cut away part of it in order to give the rest room to sit in there nicely, it's going to bunch up, it's going to look really bad. So we're going to go and we're going to clip all of our corners and all of our curves. So I'm coming into this little inward corner here and I'm cutting to but not through. This is a time when having little snips would be incredibly helpful. I want his little cheek to be super cute and curvy, so I am gonna do my little fish teeth. Yeah, having those little snips, those little scissors, very sharp scissors, would be super helpful here. It just helps you get into those tight places and lets it so that you, in fact, do not cut your thread, which I've already done already. So I went back and I re-sewed, but still. All right, we are not going to sew or clip right here because we're leaving this open so we can flip the plushie right side out and stuff it and put it together. So just gonna reach our fingers up in here. And I always like to start by turning all the little like arms, legs, ears. I find it's a lot easier to turn the whole thing once you've turned all the little parts. By the way, I took out all of my pins already that were holding the stripes where I needed them to be because doing this with those in was going to be incredibly painful. Oh, look. Hi, Tundra. Tundra the tiger, look at you. This is a good time to go in and really like push into the seams with your fingers. If you have an iron, that would help you at this point. Oh, look at this. Look at this. I clipped through my thread right there on the ear. I'm going to have to go back and fix that. Right there. To fix it, I'm going to start about a ½ inch away from where I lost my stitches, and I'm going to go right back over the stitches that I actually already have, right on top of them. Same holes, same stitch length, everything. This will lock the thread from those stitches in place so that it doesn't continue to unravel. And then I don't have to go back and redo such a big hole. All right, now I'm going over where my thread was cut, so I have the hole. And I'm going to do just like I did on the one side of the hole, and I'm going to sew right on top of the stitches that I still have for about ½ inch. And this is going to just help lock that thread into place so it doesn't continue to unravel. All right. And I'll just knot off like usual. All right, at this point you may or may not have some extra work to do. I do. I have to tack down all of these little stripes. Now, unless you also made a tiger with stripes that wrap all the way around, you won't have to do this. I'm going to go ahead and do this on my own, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to stuff your plushie and do the ladder stitch to close up the sides. All right, so I've got all of the little stripes sewn down that I can. These ones I can't because I have to wait till I close up this lovely hole. But before I do that, I have to, here I have some batting. You can buy this batting from any store, really that sells any sort of sewing stuff. I got mine from Walmart. So you just take your batting and commence with shoving it inside your little plushie. You don't need a whole lot of batting. A lot of people overstuff their plushies. Now, when you overstuff them, they can become kind of hard and not snuggly. And I guess it just depends on what, like how you like your stuffies. I like mine to be squishy. Definitely go for the farthest places first. So he's good and stuffed. Once we get him all sewn up, we can squish around the stuffing to get it where we want it. But now to do the ladder stitch. So the ladder stitch is called the ladder stitch because it looks like the rungs of a ladder before you pull it tight. So we'll start and we'll go across, and then we'll go up this side and across, up, across, up, across, up, across, and then you'll see these sort of horizontal lines going across here, which looks like the rungs of a ladder. But then we pull it tight and you can no longer see the thread at all. So here I have my thread. I'm going to go through here. And I'm still keeping that 1/4 of an inch away. So now I'm going 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of the fabric to here. And I'm going up. Okay. And directly across, go in and up. And directly across, in and up. And you can start seeing it looks like the rungs of a ladder, right? The part you put your feet on. So directly across. Directly across. All right, at this point I'm going to start pulling tight on these stitches that I already have. And there we go. All right. And we'll continue. And there you go. Got a little wonky right there, but it'll be okay. Now his armpit, where we started, looks a little sad, so I'm gonna go ahead and just do a couple of whip stitches up here, just to keep that nice and snug. Okay. I'm gonna knot off, just like how I normally do, but this time I'm gonna do something a little different with my thread before I actually cut it off. So we don't want to cut this off and leave the little tails just sticking out of his armpit. It looked like he had armpit hair, right? And not that there's anything wrong with armpit hair, but we are going to take our needle and put it into our plushie and bring it out just somewhere else. And then cut it off. And this means that the tail is trapped within the plushie. It's not sticking out to the outside. Look weird. It's nice and it's in there. Now I can finish sewing my stripes. But for all intents and purposes, this plushie is done. I hope that you found this video tutorial helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know. I look forward to seeing your plushies. Bye.